Hello, my friends. Today I want to read to you Chapter 1 of The Line Tender by Kate Allen. The morning the Great White came to Rockport, my best friend and I were sticking our fingers into coin returns of every payphone in town. We averaged about $2 a day during the summer. Most days we cashed in for candy. 75, 80, 85, I chanted, sliding the nickels around his palm. We have $1.45. Fred shrugged and gestured with his head toward the store that sold gummies and penny candy. Sometimes I wondered if almost 13 was too old to be cleaning out payphones for candy, but no one was watching us and it was hard to turn down free money. We headed over to the country store and, like magicians, turned quarters and dimes into gelatin-based sweets. I pushed open the door to the shop, walking into an incense and candy fog. Fogg immediately went for the candy section. He knew what I liked, so I let him pick. I wandered over to the postcard rack. As I spun it around, it squealed like a rusty playground swing. I scanned the column of familiar photos of Rockport, motif number 1 in twin lights, winding my red ponytail into a spiral with my finger. It was dark and cool in the shop, with the low wood beams and painted floorboards. An older man dropped a coin into a player piano, which pushed out a quick song, the kind from a carousel. Fred dropped a plastic sack of gummies onto the glass countertop beside the register, and I walked over to see what he had chosen. He'd gone with a familiar mix, heavy on worms and frogs. Mrs. Lloyd weighed the bag. The beaded chain holding her reading glasses glittered like a ruby necklace. 0.33 pounds, Fred guessed. The window on the digital scale read 0.34. Not your day, she said, smiling at Fred. As Mrs. Lloyd pulled the bag of candy off the scale, the jangly bell rang over the shop door and stopped abruptly as the door slammed against the inside wall. A boy I'd never seen before came running in. Easy, said Mrs. Lloyd, tracking the boy with her eyes. Hey, the boy cried, his flip-flops smacking against the creaky wood floors. He ran to another kid whose arm was elbow deep in a barrel of fruity Tootsie Rolls, a candy neither Fred nor I bothered with. Face to face, the boy put his hands on the other boy's shoulders. I assumed they were brothers, same thick dark hair and identical molasses brown eyes. Huge shark! This hard case bounced off the ceiling. I watched the boys and waited for the rest of the story. What? Little brother's eyes were wide as peanut butter cups. Fred walked over to the boys. Where? The boy was spitting like crazy. He looked like a 5th grader. From his excitement, I would have guessed it was a megalodon. He was wearing a Rockport t-shirt, which meant they weren't local, and they sounded like they were from the Midwest. I figured any shark was huge to them. Where are you from? I asked them. Ohio, said Big Brother. You ever seen a shark before? I asked. Only in an aquarium. His eyes were still wide. I looked at Fred. Let's go, he said, snatching the gummies. Go where? I asked. Shark, come on, he said, taking off into the bright sunlight. He left the door wide open, and I knew there would be a lecture from Mrs. Lloyd about air conditioning costs, so I pulled the door shut behind me as I followed him out. Okay, but we're not staying out there all day, I yelled ahead. We had plans to watch a movie at Fred's house. Fred looked over his shoulder for a moment, though he never stopped jogging. I kept my eyes on him and took my time, passing the Chinese import shop in the row of storefronts on the bottom floors of shingled houses, the ice cream shop covered in ivy, and telephone pole after telephone pole with a tangle of slack wires. It was hot, July hot. The last thing I wanted to do was hang around the wharf in zero shade. I didn't care what the fishermen had dragged up. I made the turn onto Dock Square, past the candy store with taffy pool in the window, and then the asphalt turned to granite slab as I made my way onto T Wharf. It was the spot in town where fishermen unloaded the catch. A crowd of people at the edge of the harbor blocked my view. I looked for Fred. The smell was strong, not Gloucester Harbor strong, but fishy. It wasn't just the herring for the traps or the catch itself. There was an earthy smell that came from the algae green wood and the water that stood still inside the breakwall. I spotted Fred and followed him as he wove his way through the people. It made me anxious and reminded me of trying to keep up with my dad at the 4th of July parade. I struggled to stay close to Fred, following in his path. I heard his voice before I saw the shark for myself. "Whoa," said Fred. I moved beside Fred, budging my way into the front row to see the shark's body being pulled by the hoist from just below the dock. As the mouth came closer, my eyes went straight to the huge serrated teeth, gnarly and sticking out at different angles. Rows and rows of white barbs sticking out of the shredded gums, pink like strawberry taffy. My instinct was to move away, but I couldn't help walking toward it until we were nearly face to face. I imagined that my whole body would fit inside, as if I were sliding into a sleeping bag, the jaws opening up around my hips. "Is that a great white?" I asked. "I'm pretty sure," said Fred. He pulled out his inhaler and took a puff. After his second puff, he said, "Your mom would know." I nodded. My mother would have known.